R2-D2, arguably the most recognizable droid in all of sci-fi, who I like to call the very heart and soul of the Star Wars franchise, the most important astromech who witnessed all of the major events of the Skywalker saga, and who George Lucas named as the ultimate hero of the entire story. Appearing across all 9 saga movies and Rogue One, and crossing paths with nearly every major character, he got to document the Skywalker story unfold in its totality. Unlike his friend 3PO, who had his memory wiped at the command of Bail Organa in Revenge of the Sith, R2 was also one of the most trustworthy droids in the entire galaxy, tasked to keep some of the rebellion's biggest secrets, and oh boy, did he know how to keep a secret well. As we witnessed in the prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars series, once upon a time R2 had a strong friendship with Anakin Skywalker before his turn to Darth Vader. R2, as documented by the Revenge of the Sith novelization, was confused when Anakin turned to the dark side. He repeatedly exclaimed he didn't know what was going on, but he goes with Anakin to Mustafar when he's told to stay behind with the ship. And a really sad side note, this is why later in the timeline when Luke tells him to stay behind in The Empire Strikes Back, R2 refuses, because in Revenge of the Sith, the last time he was told this, he never got to see Anakin again. On Mustafar, after Padme arrives, R2 started recording the argument she had with Anakin, and later he also films the birth of the twins and the death of their mother Padme. And did you know, decades later he would show this footage to Luke? But here's the thing, while R2-D2 saw changes in Anakin, there was so much he was left in the dark about. And herein lies the premise of today's theory. When Anakin turned to the dark side, R2 was the one character who had a very peculiar and incomplete perspective on the events. He witnesses Anakin and Padme's pain near the end of episode 3, and in the novelization he speaks to 3PO about this dismay as Order 66 is initiated. As the attack on the Jedi Temple occurs, both 3PO and R2 were left in the dark about the full extent of what was going on. There is a heartbreaking line in the novelization where R2 expresses to 3PO that Anakin doesn't talk to him much anymore. So from R2-D2's perspective, when Anakin goes to Mustafar and Obi-Wan Kenobi confronts him, Anakin goes into that fight but never made it out. He knew about the duel, but not the aftermath. In his eyes, Master Kenobi had fought a fallen Anakin, but only the former had returned. Now hold on to this thought, we are going to come back to it in just a bit. So fast forward 19 years, when R2 has a message for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he encounters him on Tatooine, the Jedi Master in front of Luke pretends to not recognize R2. I mean, sure, we can get into pedantics about Obi-Wan's exact choice of words, saying that he never owned a droid, never actually saying he didn't know R2. Off screen, he whispers to R2 and calls him his old friend, and that is when R2-D2 realizes he's playing coy. Later in A New Hope, in Obi-Wan's hut, when Obi-Wan tells Luke Skywalker the story of his father, R2 doesn't beep or say anything, even though Obi-Wan's story is a blatant lie. From a certain point of view, Old Ben tells Luke that Darth Vader was a pupil of his until he turned to evil. He betrayed and murdered Luke's father. Technically the truth, apart from the fact that Vader and Anakin are the same person. The wording was deliberately deceiving. R2-D2 never had his memory wiped, so he knew this was a lie. Even though canonically we know R2 trusted Obi-Wan had Luke's best interests in mind, all of these years, R2 may have had a sneaking suspicion it was Obi-Wan who murdered Anakin. And so when he hears this story, which is obviously a lie, R2 figures it's just Obi-Wan's cover-up story. He never saw Anakin's transition physically into Darth Vader. He witnessed what happened on Mustafar, but didn't see the entire fight. Now in canon, by the time of Return of the Jedi, R2 knew the full truth. But knowing in A New Hope that Obi-Wan was deliberately being dishonest to Luke, even if R2 didn't come to that specific conclusion, he knows for a fact Obi-Wan was being less than honest. It doesn't help that Obi-Wan fails to mention that Leia is Luke's twin sister. When the hologram is being presented, R2 knew Anakin and Padme Amidala were expecting twins, and he documented their birth. R2's silence was a conscious choice, born out of loyalty to Obi-Wan, even if he may have had a thought that he was responsible for Anakin's death. R2 was not present when Anakin was salvaged by the Emperor and put into his new suit. R2 was fantastic at being secretive, and this also applies to his reunion with Master Yoda in Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. R2 didn't tell Luke who Yoda was because he saw that Yoda was testing him and didn't want to interfere. R2 was in on the secret to keep the identity of the twins absolutely discreet. He knew and witnessed Anakin turn to the dark side, but there is very little evidence he pieced together Anakin survived the duel on Mustafar and went on to become Darth Vader in the suit, even though technically the last time R2 saw him, he was already Vader, but he looked like Anakin and hadn't yet suffered the life-changing injuries. R2 of course eventually found out. The fact Bail Organa didn't have his memory wiped was a testament how devoted and loyal R2 was, and they were in a way respecting Anakin's wishes, which is the reason they only wiped 3PO's memory. R2 and 3PO knew about the twins. 3PO tells R2, in the Episode 3 novelization, "How lovely, his daughter is the child of Master Anakin and Senator Amidala. I can't wait to tell her all about her parents. I'm sure she'll be very proud." Now while we're on the subject of R2-D2, C-3PO and Darth Vader, while we don't have an extensive amount of information about Vader's thoughts of R2 during the original trilogy, there was a moment in the comic Thank the Maker where Vader encounters C-3PO's dismembered head after the incident on Bespin in The Empire Strikes Back. He looks upon the protocol droid he once built. In the comic, Vader receives the head of 3PO, and in this brief moment in time, he drops his guard and connects with the disembodied head. It's a very powerful scene, a rare moment Vader shows his humanity, almost like Anakin is breaking through for this one sentimental reflection. He thinks back to his mother, Shmi, and his childhood. He can't even focus on what his Imperial officers are trying to tell him, and the comic demonstrates why the Empire let the rebels keep C-3PO. As bizarre as it may sound, a part of Vader wanted 3PO to live. There is no moments like this with R2 during the original trilogy time period. George Lucas was aware of how important R2 was to the Star Wars story. In 2005, he said this, "R2 is the Lassie of the movies. Whenever there is a pivotal moment of real danger, he's the one that gets everybody out of it." R2's deep friendship and loyalty is expressed through his actions, which speak louder than words. While he almost always had an attitude and wasn't afraid to speak his mind, R2 had a strong sense of what was right and wrong. He was always trying to ensure his friend's safety and stopped at nothing to achieve that goal. R2 always protected those he loved, and that is what makes him the true hero of the Star Wars universe. Share your thoughts in the comments down below, guys, and subscribe for more Star Wars videos like this. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.